Good morning, everyone. I'm so honored to be here with you all and to help moderate this discussion with our fantastic panelists. I'm going to do brief introductions and then we'll get started. We're joined today, starting at the end of our panel, with Bruce Au, who's the Secretary General of the Yidan Prize Foundation, a Hong Kong-based global foundation which recognizes and champions change makers who make the world a better place through education. Next to Bruce, we have Laura Aller, who's a Brazilian economist and social scientist, CEO of the philanthropic platform Velez Reyes Plus, which invests in education and democracy as levers for a Latin America of equal access to opportunities. And then next to me, we have Cecilia Conrad. She's an economist, the past head of the MacArthur Fellows Program, and the first CEO of Lever for Change, an organization that helps funders and nonprofits discover new potential. Our session is titled Philanthropy in Times of Disruption. And I want to start by just noting that times of disruption feels like a philanthropy polite way of capturing times that are deeply chaotic, right? Times of rising authoritarianism and unjust wars and increasing economic precarity and a climate clock that keeps ticking. And we are all gathering here today from different places. And so we have different experiences of what it is to live in these times of disruption. The who and what of disruption might look different where we are. And yet, what I'm really excited about is that our panelists are each bringing really valuable experience of engaging in philanthropy in these consequential times. So by way of introduction, I'll just share that for the last 11 months, I've been sharing my book, A New Era of Philanthropy, and advising and accompanying donors and foundations in meeting this moment. And what I've noticed is that collectively, we no longer need to be convinced of the stakes in this moment. But I've also noticed that as a sector, philanthropy is still searching for answers about philanthropy's purpose and potential, and whether this tool can be reshaped and repurposed to meet this new era. We're also really trying to figure out the time frame that we're in. I was sharing with Cecilia this morning over breakfast that so many boards that I speak with will say, well, but we increased our spending last year, right? Well, we've been in this emergency moment for 3 years now. And so this is one of the reasons that in my book, I really called it The New Era, because I think part of figuring out how to meet this time of disruption is actually figuring out what is this time, right? And that's something we're still trying to figure out. So I think the question for all of us in these times is not simply how do we weather or survive the disruption, but rather what is it that we, those of us working in philanthropy, must disrupt right now, right? What are the old stories, the old narratives, the default practices that no longer serve us in this time? And so we are going to hear from 3 funders who are not only funding in times of disruption, but are actually each disrupting outdated philanthropic defaults and models in their own work. So before we dive in, this is a room, and for those of you who are joining online, a Zoom, that's full of wisdom. And so we're going to do a little exercise to get your voices into the room. I'm going to ask you to turn to the person next to you. I'm going to ask you to take a minute to think about the question I'm going to pose, and then we're going to take 2 minutes and have you share your answers with each other, and we'll have a chance to bring some of your answers into the room. And if you're watching online, just please jot down this answer for yourself. So you're turning to the person next to you. It's 2045. the world is measurably more equitable, peaceful, and just than it is today. And I want you to finish this sentence. Philanthropy helped us get here by. Okay. So again, take a minute to think about this. It's 2045.
Can I talk to you about it?
The world is more equitable, peaceful, and just.
I don't think they can.
Philanthropy helped us get here by. I suspected that you all would have some thoughts on the matter. So it's great to see them. And so we are going to have a mic going around, and I would love to hear from 2 or maybe 3 of you. How did you answer that prompt? So if you could raise your hand or just catch one of the mics going around. Right over here in the front, we have.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, my name is Duro Oye, and I'm from 2020 Levels, which is based here in the UK. And I answered the prompt by saying, philanthropy helped us get here by using their convening power to galvanize conversations that led to a flow of capital to a variety of different issues. Because what we're seeing is everyone cares about different things, and it's very difficult for you to mobilize and get forward motion in a variety of different things. So if you have different clusters of bringing people together that care about similar issues and then driving that forward by ensuring that they have the resources to do the work on the ground.
Fantastic, thank you. We have another one right here. And then one in the back. And then one in the back, yeah.
Hi, thank you. We'll do it, philanthropy will do it by helping governments improve their performance to accelerate economic and social progress. It's
Yes.
government.
Yes. And in case everyone didn't hear that, by helping governments, can you say it one more time? Improve their
performance to accelerate social and economic progress.
Thank you. And we'll take a last one up at the top. Okay, we'll take one more on this side.
So I must compliment the question, very thought-provocative. What I felt is that philanthropy will really be disruptive if it can prepare the bottom of the pyramid, those who are most vulnerable, to really be ready for any huge shifts, any kind of, because we are living with uncertainty. The assumption is that there will be uncertainty going forward. So what we see now is the most vulnerable continue to really get the worst of it. So if you're talking about justice and equality, they will be better prepared, more resilient, and that is how we see a just and equitable society.
Thank you. And last one over here.
Tokumbo Ishmael, I'm an investor in Africa that invests for both impact and sustainability, financial performance. There's some things that have already been said that we mentioned here, but in addition, that philanthropic capital and owners should trust those that are proximate to the problems, that they understand the problems, and also to use their capital to catalyze not just public capital, but also other forms of private capital, and providing those motivations for that.
Yes, thank you. Wonderful. Well, I hope that you all will keep this conversation going. And now I'm really excited to bring our panelists into it. So let's start with this moment of disruption. From where each of you sit, how are you meeting this moment? And what is it that you are seeking to transform with your philanthropy? And what are the levers and strategies that you're drawing on to drive change? And we're going to start with you, Cecilia.
Thank you. And thank you for the comments that came from the audience. I'm hopeful that we'll get to address some of those more later on in the conversation. This moment of disruption has served as a bit of an affirmation for me about the approach that Lever for Change has taken. Historically, philanthropy has tended to concentrate decision-making in the hands of a few, and those few are typically not representative of the client population that philanthropy is intended to serve. It also it tends to be a group of decision makers who may be insulated, as someone noted earlier, from the impact of the chaos and the uncertainty and the things that we are confronting. And since its start at Lever for Change, we've been trying to open up that decision process by engaging both organizations who participate in our open calls and the reviews, by building panels of external constituencies to help evaluate projects. And so, during this period of change, I think this commitment that we have to openness and transparency has seemed more important than ever. But there's a second component as well, and that is that we have also really emphasized and tried to acculturate donors to the idea of giving multi-year substantial amounts of capital with a lot of flexibility to the organizations. And what we've heard, particularly in the last year, we've had an internal kind of open call among our members of our Bold Solutions Network for stabilization funds, and we asked them to talk about what was happening to them. And what became clear is that the fact that they had some funding in the past that was relatively unrestricted and flexible was helping them survive in some of the ways other nonprofits might not have been able to. It's clear that that's important for resilience and for allowing organizations to pivot and react to the chaos.
Thank you. Laura.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. Such a pleasure to be here with all of you, and indeed wonderful to hear from the crowd. I hope we get to address some of these questions. I think the first thing I have to say is that I come from Latin America, so even though we're part of the world and feeling this global crisis, I feel we have had a good share of crises on our own, and I feel with that we have been able to grow some resilience and some resourcefulness on how to see crisis as times for opportunity for creation. It means that what we have been doing isn't working, so we have to create what's new. But that being a global crisis, that one of the manifestations was the retraction of international funds from Latin America, I feel it's also an opportunity for us to think our shared vision, as you're saying. From us to us, what is the Latin America that we want to build? So I think it's a time for us to step up as Latin Americans too and engage in that shared vision and make it come true. And a combo that I feel comes together that is really having very high ambitions for systemic change. How can we create things that are sustainable, systemic, working with governments, working with markets as well, but at the same time knowing that we don't know the answer. I can say very honestly here that at Village Reyes Mas right now we have a lot of good hypotheses, but much more questions than answers. And I feel the reason why we're in a crisis right now is because nobody really knows the answer. So we need to get together to build this answer. So it builds this, on one hand, huge sense of ambition, but also huge sense of humbleness that we need to learn together how to get out of this and build something that is better to get to equal access to opportunity and a more just future for everyone, as someone has said in the audience before.
Thank you so much.
I just have to observe that there are two economists who say we don't know the answer.
Yes. That's very rare. Usually
I have to observe that in philanthropy for a long time we've been unwilling to say that.
Yes.
Right? I think our default culture is we have the answers and we're going to tell you what they are. And so I deeply appreciate the humility and the mix of ambition and humility and leaning into the answers and to the partnership. So Bruce, tell us about your work.
Not knowing the answer.
Yes.
And I think you asked a very tough question. I think you're asking, what would you do, Bruce, to meet this moment? I feel like I cannot hide from my organization strategy or say what needs to be done. I joined the Yidan Prize Foundation last year. I came on board with a commitment. The first day I walked into my office, I wrote it down on the window. Be grateful for what have been done by those for the organization. Based on what have been done, move forward. And then seek breakthroughs as we move forward. So that's the commitment I brought to it. I was, before I joined, I was a grant maker in another charitable foundations, one of the largest. It was called the largest in Asia by the Bridgespan report. And that was that. I think here, I feel like if you really ask me what I need to do personally, I think is to do the things that I may fail at, but really think that it ought to be done. So that is my honest answer from my inner world for this really tough one. In terms of the outer world, what it really means, I think for those of you who may not be familiar with the Yidan Prize, it's $4 million US, 2 prizes per year, finding change makers who make the world a better place through education. It's a pretty safe way to make impact. These are amazing people, and then we, give them money, and it's a safe way. But I think that's the thing. But what if we set goals that we feel we may not be able to achieve?
Yeah.
I think that's what I really try to do in this time of challenge.
What I really appreciate in what you're saying, Bruce, is I'm hearing how you are in between, or kind of on a bridge between the old ways of doing things and the new, which is inviting us to take bigger risks. Well, thank you. Those of us who had the gift of hearing from Trevor Noah last night might remember that he powerfully noted that a key part of giving has to do with dignity. And so I want us to kind of get into what does that dignity look like in your work, and how do you approach relationships in your philanthropic practice? And I'm going to start with you, Bruce.
No, thank you. I lined up number 1 last night for Trevor Noah.
He was on the front row.
I want him to know about it. In the Yidan Prize community, we do not have grantees. We only have laureates. Okay, so I think that said something about the relationship approach that we want to bring. So for us, it's an open call for nominations, independent judging committee. So for the Secretariat, we are not judging them. We essentially recognize excellence that's already there, and then we stand behind it with it. That's kind of our job. So the cash prize, the project fund are unrestricted. So that's the baseline for us, because we've already trusted them. They've been chosen, and not by me, independent judging committee. So that is the starting point of how we see. And if you allow me to be a bit technical about it, then we also try to make sure we have rituals to really make them and us feel like we're working together. Essentially, we are not doing a strategy, and it goes back to what we don't know what's the answer. We want the world to tell us who are these people, what they're doing, and then we shine a spotlight at them. And to do that, we would have, the rituals of, we call them to congratulate them. We have a award ceremony for that. And the funding is just the beginning of the relationship. They will make a speech at the award ceremony, and that would be articulating their visions and missions. And that is the bond between them and us, and that's forever. We're not going to have a new strategy and then turn a portfolio. We are one and inseparable. So that's when I say be grateful for what has been done. I think these traditions have been really powerful and are things that I'm grateful for. And then the question is how to kind of take it forward.
Laura.
Yes, I love the question because I think it's all about the people.
Yeah.
I have very clear that the impact we will have is a direct function of the people we work with. And it starts with the people in our team, the people in the organizations we support that we call entrepreneurs, not laureates, but that's a good name. The other partners we co-invest with, so it's really all about the people. We do see them as entrepreneurs, and I agree that people who are on the front lines, they know the problem better. But being very honest again, when I started this job, I thought it was, so I just need to redistribute the resources. I just need just need to make it get to the people who are there and need it. And what I learned is that I don't think that's the way we can help the most. We feel we also have a responsibility as a philanthropic organization. I'm able to be sitting here, and we have 30 organizations in the portfolio. Not all of them can be here, but I do feel in a way I'm also an ambassador of them. So the relationship we create is a relationship with skin on the game. We need to create together the solutions, so we're together in this, we can contribute to different things. They are the entrepreneurs, so it all starts with a huge appreciation and admiration for the work they're doing. They know the challenges better than anyone else. We never subcontract people to deliver on our KPIs.
Yeah.
We invest in entrepreneurs to build what's next, to create this solution that we also don't know what it is, but we also try to identify what is our responsibility to them, how we can best help. And I agree with you that it's much more than a financial transaction. So that's an important part. But mostly we sit on the boards of the organizations we support. We try to connect them to other stakeholders that can be helpful. So we really try to build together in the trenches, acknowledging our different roles to build things together, treating everyone with a lot of dignity in the process.
I love that. And Cecilia.
It's interesting in this conversation because there are more commonalities than I necessarily expected going in. And I'm just going to start with a little bit of context. Before I became founder of Lever for Change, I ran a program at MacArthur called the MacArthur Fellows Program, which has a lot in common with the Yidan Prize. But it was also, in some ways, really the first big example of kind of what we call trust-based philanthropy, because 45 years ago, we started giving out to individuals these unrestricted cash grants and said, here, we've seen that you've done great things, go do more great things. And the track record of that project made me really comfortable with the concept in Lever for Change of grants going out to organizations and letting the organizations define what the work will be. But to echo what you've said, a big part of our responsibility is to uplift. When I was running the Fellows Program, it was to uplift the fellows. In the case of Lever for Change, we have the organizations who've gotten grants through our open calls. We also have the organizations that have done really well but didn't get the grant. And we are committed to that community to help promote them, highlight the work they're doing, do what we can to really amplify and hope to eventually draw in more funders and support along that process. But one of the words that Trevor used yesterday is dignity. Yes. And I think an important part of interacting with the organizations we work with is sort of recognizing the multiple forms of expertise that they bring to the table. And that is something that is built into our acknowledgement of how will we get problems solved. We need people like us who don't know the answers, and we need other people who may have ideas about answers that are quite different, and sort of accepting that. We also have another set of constituency, though, and that's the donors. And one of the things there, again, I think goes to respect and dignity, and to acknowledging and appreciating that many of the donors who work with us are doing something really courageous. They are ceding some control. And I think we all know how hard that is to do. And so helping and understanding that ceding of control requires providing information and helping to build confidence is another important part of what we're working on.
I love this because one of the things that I thought a lot about as I was writing A New Era was this question of who do we need to be as philanthropy in this moment? So I just want to kind of capture what I heard you all say, which is we need to be the ones that amplify. We need to be the ones that uplift. We don't need to subcontract, right? As donors, we need to be the ones who are ceding control. And then on the other side of the relationship, I heard you say that those who we are moving capital to, they are the entrepreneurs, they are the laureates, they are the experts, right? And we need to have, on both sides, skin in the game. Thank you. That's beautiful. So one thing that is true about crisis and disruption is that it can reveal new possibilities. So I think about how in 2020, when COVID shut the world down, many people working in philanthropy discovered that they could move money faster and with far more flexibility than they thought they could. And for many funders, the shift towards power sharing practices, things like flexible funding, long-term grants, more trust-based relationships, for many funders, that actually began as a response to crisis. And yet, for some, those practices actually outlasted the immediate crisis that inspired it. And so I wanted to talk about how, as you are navigating these still turbulent times, what's something that you are doing right now that you believe could become a practice of this next era of philanthropy? Something that you are kind of fashioning in response to crisis, but that you want to see the sector carry forward. And I'm going to start with you, Laura.
Yes, I think I'll go back to how you started, Dippo, saying that the stakes are very high.
Yeah.
So I think this invited us to think, what is the most catalytic, to use that word that has said before, what is the more catalytic role that we can have? And we think it's looking for what's systemic change. So we at Velas Tres Mas, we exist to help the most we can to get to a Latin America of equal access to opportunities. We know that we will not be the ones creating equal access to opportunities at scale. So it's really about what can we do to have the engines, the tectonic plates that move things, governments and markets, they're the ones that can create systemic change. And we're trying to see what can we do for make those two work better. So we have sharpened our approach really for looking not only at solutions that are impactful, but that are scalable, that are sustainable, and this has changed a bit the approach that we have. And the second thing that I don't know if it's a bit controversial, I really believe in what you were saying, that we need to build confidence, and that takes time to build. And I also feel it takes mechanisms of accountability. So one thing we have started last year that for us was really helpful was to create this directorate of monitoring, evaluation, and learning. And having this as the backbone of everything that we do, we don't feel metrics are there to judge and to evaluate. It's not, are you passing this test of having impact or not, and based on this, I will decide the grant. But the contract we have with our entrepreneurs, it's because of the impact we want to achieve together. So we need to learn, what are the hypotheses that we have? We need to be very diligent on what is our theory of change? What is the, we can see tomorrow systemic change that will take time, but we need to have a very rigorous way of thinking how we will get there. And how can we measure as we go? And we say internally that we write KPIs in pencil. So what we do is that with all of the organizations we work with, we agree on a subset of their own KPIs that they agree with their boards. And we say, this is our learning agenda. These are the things we want to see progress on. We will never punish them in a way for being too ambitious. It has happened that we've seen one that had a super high target and they didn't meet, and we say, well, we cannot say, say hello, so we won't fund you because you were being too ambitious. And it had times that hypotheses were totally wrong. They thought that this would happen and would lead to something, and that didn't happen. But it was an amazing organization that knew how to incorporate that learning to pivot and to shift. So that's part of the work we want to see. So all of this to say, I think in creating trust-based relationships with a lot of confidence, I think it goes hand in hand having also rigorous processes to understand what is the impact we're creating. I do think in our case, the evidence-informed approach has helped us to create this trust instead of being at odds with trust-building relationship. It is a trust-building, we have different roles, but I think we need to know what it is that we want to achieve together towards systemic change.
Mm-hmm. Cecilia.
I have three things. Two of them are broadly, well, actually, maybe all of them. They're not necessarily my organization. But I'll start with the first, and this is just an observation from what we've seen in the turmoil over the past, my organization started in 2019. So we began with COVID, and then we've had the more recent kind of chaos. What I've seen is that philanthropy has, I thought over time, had a move towards what I thought were improvements in practices and sort of more openness, more willingness to give flexible funding and so on. But whenever a kind of crisis hits, there's almost a reversion to past practices. And one of the things that we tried to work on internally was we set up a fund, a stabilization fund for organizations that were part of our network. But as we learned from that, we realized that maybe philanthropy should be in the position of anticipating when the next crisis is going to hit and imagining creating some mechanism, perhaps it's a regional mechanism, perhaps it's national mechanisms, that are immediately triggered to begin to provide either revolving loans or forgivable loans or things to help organizations through those periods so that philanthropy can continue to focus on long-run goals and not on losing sight of those as they chase after each one of those crises. So that's one of the first. The second, and this is the accountability issue. The second thing these past 10 years have taught me is that the notion of systems change that I had, which was one of we'll identify some critical triggers and switch those, and the system will change its direction and move that way forever. Systems change can be undone. How do you create mechanisms of accountability to try and slow that process? And so I think that's a piece where philanthropy can play a role going forward, is thinking about how can we support organizations, institutions who will act as a brake when those great progress we made starts to get unraveled and to turned back. And then the third is just...
Can you just give an example? Sorry, that's,
Okay.
that's such an important point. Can you give an example of what that looks like in your work?
Yes, I'll give one example for, and this is one that I started thinking about a few years ago as an economist. Where do I think, what kinds of nonprofits should probably have an endowment? Okay, so that they have some liberty, some independence. And the first one that came to mind for me in the US was legal aid. Believe it or not, in the US, there's supposed to be a right to an attorney, but there is no system of funding ongoing support for both either criminal and particularly civil, which is important for evictions and things, and now we're seeing for deportations and so on. Because those organizations tend to have their funding kind of based on public support, based on donations, and they don't have a reserve. And so I started there thinking about it. I now have this conversation because I've been talking to Karen about some of the work that her organization has been doing globally in terms of right to counsel. But there are other institutions like that, but that's the first one. And we see that the legal system is an important bulwark.
Absolutely. That one's so near and dear to my heart because I began my career as a legal services lawyer.
I did not know.
Yes. And because that work is funded through public funding, when you have cycles like the one we are in right now, where there's the scarcity of public resources, then in that moment where we need those services the most, it's hardest to find. You were going to say a third point.
The third one is actually a point that you made this morning, and you alluded to, and that is that foundations, one of the big things that's happened that I'm very excited about, MacArthur, with whom we have a close relationship, was one of the first to say we're going to up our spending rate. And I'm hoping that we get a norm established that 5%, at least among the US foundations, should be the minimum, not the cap.
Well, and the thing is, legally, it is the minimum. And so actually, what we need is a profound mindset shift, right? That we need to move from having our norm be that we do the minimum. And then we also need a real practice shift where the way that we make that decision of how much we are going to spend it should be informed by our mission. It should be centered on our mission and not on preservation of this capital. So yeah, we talked about that this morning, and I think that's one that we're starting to see many foundations make this bump up, and yet what concerns me is that it's still, what we're not seeing yet, although I hope we get there, is a fundamental reimagining of how we decide how much to spend. So when we're seeing these increases, we're seeing them as a one-year exception to what is our norm. And yet, we are about 10 years into a time of disruption. And so I think, again, we need to think of this as an era, and we need to match our core practices, like how much do we spend? We need to match those to what these times demand. Bruce, I'm going to go to you.
I do feel like there's a lot of kind of consensus and agreement, and I also heard that philanthropy should help government perform better, should move capital, value lived experience. This is all good. I did sense a tendency to kind of drive to maybe then we all do this, maybe not unintended. So I wish to kind of broaden the discussion a bit. The conversations about how to spend, how to donate is very much, in my observations, a very US construct. Different parts of the world, philanthropies are done differently. Okay, so let's say in India, I saw friends from India, they have a 2% tax on company profit. I mean, imagine, like if someone proposed that in the US or in the UK, like it's not gonna fly. So they have some cultural and social history that led them to have that. So for them, they need to think about how, so the corporate kind of philanthropy would feel different from here. So they would need to think about how they construct that model that fits their work. And then let's say in Hong Kong, we are Hong Kong based, and Singapore, you would imagine that we would be talking about cross-border donations, because that has to do with the financial center, like core business of these two city-states, or whatever you call them. So, like they are different, and there are so many operating foundations in the rest of the world. Sometimes they may feel that, because we are in the early stage of development, when we reach the pinnacle of philanthropy, we will be about allocating capital. Right? I don't know if that's true. Because they don't have to, like in the US, you literally have, like it's the legal minimum to pay. They're like, no. And it's hard to set up a foundation, so they don't want to trust their money with folks that maybe they feel like there will be reputation risk, maybe they can't do this. And so they are there not because they want to operate, but like what else to do? So I just kind of want to broaden that.
Absolutely.
And I want to share there is actually a commission on Asian philanthropy that has brought together 13 foundations from Asia, from Middle East to India to China, Japan, Indonesia. They are really talking about, how to make the domestic philanthropy bigger, better, deeper. I see we still have some time, so if you don't mind, then that's very macro. Like, I mean, oh wow, like great, yay, different models. But then, like, come back to kind of your question, your practice. I do want to share the struggles that funders would also face, because we can say, hey, we're trust-based, we're long-term, we anticipate issues. But it is very real in that the inner work, the baseline that everyone is doing their best. The government people, like private sectors, our partners. That has to do with whether we kind of go back to my earlier comment, like, are we willing to do things that may fail, but we know it ought to be done?
Yeah.
And that practice is quite applicable, I think, in the actual work as well. So be specific, like what I'm struggling with is, I told you, it's kind of a safe way to do actual good. But then, like, we're on education, I think about what's going on in the world. Like, AI is like disrupting everyone. Like, maybe you see kids, maybe yourself, are addicted to the screen. Teachers are using AI to create homework, and kids use AI to answer the homeworks, and then teachers use AI to grade the homeworks. Okay, and then there's also the loneliness epidemic in the background that people talk about it, maybe in the health domain. So like these things are real, are happening. Like we cannot say, but with you, so if we have a crowd of laureates, from China, India, Bangladesh, Lebanon, Austria, US, Latin America,
Colombia.
Yeah, West Africa, East Africa, and they come from all disciplines, like psychologists. We have Nobel physicists, statisticians, economists. So like if we have a bunch of people like that, like shouldn't they say something or like, like try to shape some agenda? Yeah. But if you are sitting on my seat, like they're busy, they are working really hard on their things.
Yeah.
Like who am I, like Bruce, to like galvanize like an agenda, and then actually get others as well, like Cecilia, Laura, maybe we should go there, think about human connections and relationships and get away from just like metrics, to add on that. Like, I mean, maybe I won't get there. But I think that's the struggle I want to share. Like, I think everyone is really trying their best. The laureates are trying their best. Many funders are doing that. And I think this practice, you asked about practice, I think is, in addition to talk about the outer world, is the conversations about inner world that I think would be meaningful for the work we do.
Can I ask?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that, Bruce.
Can I?
Yes.
It's a very good comment. Thank you so much for speaking up. I do want to take the chance of that to do a caveat that we're here talking on behalf of each of our models in a way, because those are the models that we think we can best contribute. Again, they're not the right answer. So it doesn't mean that everybody should be doing that work. And I like the courage in what you say of putting us on the spot too, of having to look internally to see what we are best positioned to do. So in our case, we love high risk, high returns. We are investors. We want to take risk. We love getting in early stage. That's not the profile of every funder. And it's great that we have some other funders that maybe they won't invest in that time. They will invest in more consolidated things to help them scale up. So we need a diversity of approaches. And beyond looking inwards, as you were saying, to what can we do, I love the provocation you do on, okay, we're looking inwards, but what can we look to the side to see what can we do together and going beyond what we're already doing. So thank you for the invitation you're doing.
Thank you.
Can I pose a question to both of you? Because one of the criticisms of philanthropy is that it's supposed to be risk capital, but that we don't necessarily take enough risk. And both of you have mentioned risk as a big part of your profile. How do you think about looking back, whether you know if you've taken enough risk? Like, what do you think about when you look at that?
I can start. I asked that question myself. I don't know. I wish we could have taken more risk and then sharing the struggles. I think my struggle on the other side is with focus. And I think one very hard thing working in philanthropy is there is so much to be done. And there's so many things that are net positive, but we can't do everything. So I would have loved to take in more risk, but the more risk we take, the more we diversify, I feel the more we stay at the surface. So sometimes we have to make hard choices, but to choose something to go super deep. And then I think we can find the better opportunities because it is a relationship of risk and return. And I think we need to become also experts in our own sectors to know where to find those better opportunities. I have said many times, and I'll say again, there's one organization that I feel super proud we supported. We have given them, the first check was just $20K, was the 20K that enabled them to exist. And now they're doing amazing things. So I think that's the highest return on investment we have done. But we were able to find it because we were specific working in the sector, because we were looking for the best people to do that thing. And if we go too broad, then we lose focus and can't find those opportunities. But I would love to be able to take even more risk. Maybe it's something we need to share the risk and do together and specialize in different things to be better able to take on the opportunities.
In my case, thanks for asking it. In my previous foundations, I think it would be more applicable to answer that because, like, we did, so to speak, big bets a lot. So we're talking about upward of $50 million US, $100 million US on multiple fronts, all focused in Hong Kong. I think for Yidan Prize, at the heart of it, it's a value statement to say education is the crucial force to shape the world for everyone. So that, for us, is just to uphold that. So we are getting into our 10th year, and as you can imagine, we'll be getting great advice on what change we should make for the next 10 years. Why do you do this? You know, like, why isn't there like a junior prize? Or like, why are we not focusing on like a continent? No, like genuinely, we loved all these inputs. But then at the end, no one knows the right answer, but then the conclusion was perhaps in time of changes, the bold thing to do is to stay steady on course, and then to build upon that. So
Thanks.
I kind of dodged your question a little bit, but
I'm going to just make an offering.
I think it's, different philanthropy kind of have different questions that are really bugging them.
So this through line about risk and building on something I heard you say, Bruce, about failure, right? The thing I want to kind of pull out is that we're very private about our failures in philanthropy, right? And I think some of it has to do with this sense that we are stewards of public resources. And so we want to always look like we're doing the best possible thing, that we've got the strongest track record. And I think that culture runs against the risk, right? And one of the kind of exercises I offer in the book is that when we come together as funders, we should actually normalize sharing the places that we failed, right? And I offer that because I think about when I ran a donor collaborative, we had this project that was kind of the first of its kind in the US. It was an investment in a shared communications hub that 100 different grantees were using in what had been, at that time, a very disconnected field. And it ended up being a model that was replicated by many different fields, and it was seen as a real success, and we wrote a report about it. And what I never said in that report, and what I felt like I could never say when I was leading that project, is that the reason that that project was so successful is that it built on the failure that came before. That in fact, we had done a very intense and expensive investment in messaging work that didn't go where we wanted it to go at all. And it was the lessons from that, and from listening to the field, and from realizing what we got wrong, it was the failure that took us to the thing that was lifted up as a success. And so I think what happens is, whether we say it or not, we all have those. We all have the investment that we made that failed. We did all hopefully take risks, right? But we don't normalize talking about it. And so what ends up happening is that we actually don't accelerate the collective learning that could happen. We don't get to learn with each other. And importantly, for the organizations that we're supporting, we don't actually normalize them taking big risks. We don't normalize their ambitions. I loved, Laura, when you talked about measurement, but the KPIs in pencil, because you don't want to hold back and penalize ambition. So that ambition has to include space for risk-taking. And if we normalize talking about failure, then that risk-taking actually can happen more.
Such a good point.
To do that, I think it's based on the relationship, the foundations, and the partners already had.
Yes, or that you build.
And so that is the pre-work. Otherwise, if either side, if they don't feel like you are open to listening, then they will just tell you what you think you want to hear, and then, but they will do the thing that really needs to be done. You know, so I absolutely think sometimes I like to say I haven't failed, just run out of time. So it's more on learning, I think, you know, like how to improve and how to get out of the way. Because if you have that trust, you agree on outcome and then let them, you know the MacArthur Award, we learn a lot from that.
So this has been fantastic, and we have a very lively audience here. And so I'm going to turn it over actually to you all to share your questions for our panelists, to share your provocations. We have mics going around, and we're going to start on this side of the room. We have a hand over here. Okay. We're going to go here and then in the back, or...
So, oi, bom dia. Good morning. So, my name is Luana Genot. I came from Brazil, from Instituto Identidades do Brasil. And I have a question about risks, but also connected to equality. Topics like equality and human rights are receiving less investment globally. As institutions become more cautious or politically fearful, how do you keep your boards and stakeholders committed to supporting these issues through funding, awards, and public recognition? And if you could share some examples of how you navigate this context now, would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a good question.
I can try to start. As a Brazilian, I can try to respond. So in our case, one thing we have done is that we have created this network of political leadership incubators. It was based on one model that was really working in Brazil, and what we have done is to help taking it to 6 countries. And what we want at the end of the day, it's stronger democracies. And the way we designed the model, we knew that we were not the best ones to know if those values were being upheld in the best way. So what we have decided to do in terms of design is that we created local boards in each of the countries we operate. Together with the entrepreneurs, we were very careful in curating who should be in that board to ensure diversity of perspectives, of point of views, of backgrounds, of sectors, and that we agree on the values and the vision, but those boards are the ones that are the decision makers for that organization. And that board is steering it and not us. We are part of that board. We have skin in the game. We have a seat. But we open up the governance space to have these other voices knowing what it is that should be done in Peru to improve politics and what it is that should be done in Costa Rica, and that's different. So we have tried to create these local governance bodies to help us know how best to move forward in each context.
Cecilia, do you want to also?
Yes. So I'll start with the network of organizations that we're working with, because like you, we've sort of let each organization decide how it wants to navigate. We are a conversation partner. We also have forums where the organizations can talk to each other. And so some of the organizations in our network have made conscious decisions to change their language. Our stabilization grants helped some higher communications firms to go through their websites. And some organizations have decided to stay the course because they're committed to their mission and they don't know how they could reword the mission to align with what is the current political climate. As an organization, we made a decision to stick to what we were doing. And so if you look at any of the applications for our open calls, there is still a question that asks people to address how they're going to make sure that their project is inclusive of people who are maybe at the margins of whatever society they're working in, that it's going to be inclusive of people with disabilities, all of which are kind of being marked as verboten in the US. It is so far, and maybe saying this on a live stream may not be the way to do this, but we've been under the radar. But we're prepared. We made a conscious decision that this is how we stand. And we had that conversation with our board that this was our plan, and our board is with us. And so what we're trying to acknowledge is that organizations in our network may have to make different choices depending on what their positions are, and we're trying to support those choices.
I'll just add, I'm glad that you brought that question up. I think I've been thinking of it as a narrative. So organizations have to be prepared, right? So to lift up what you're saying, you have to understand that the moment has shifted, the consequences potentially have shifted. I've also been thinking about this as a narrative issue in terms of us really needing to revisit what is the purpose of philanthropy right now? Mm-hmm. Who is philanthropy for? What is it we're trying, this is public, private resources for the public good. I think about when, I think it was in 2015, I had the chance to hear Alicia Garza, one of the co-founders of the Black Lives Matter movement, speaking. And she was talking about civic engagement. And she said, she was talking to a room full of funders funding civic engagement. And she said, if you're not funding communities of color, are you just investing more in white power? And that really stayed with me. And I think one of the things that I've been talking about right now is just that we have to understand philanthropy is never neutral. It's always an exercise of power. And so when we come into these systems that are inequitable, if we're not bringing a lens that looks at racial justice or gender justice, then what are we doing? We're essentially just amplifying the inequities that already exist within that system. So, I feel like in the disruptive moment, the norms might be shifting, but I think actually what it calls on us as funders to do is to be really grounded in a purpose that makes sense right now.
I was going to add to that there's also a narrative that's deeply embedded in a lot of places about that somehow there's a trade-off between efficiency and growth and being attentive to issues of equity and inclusiveness. And there is a counter-narrative that's built into, and I'm an economist, it's built into the kind of market economy notion, and that is that you're not finding the best ideas, you're not getting the best people, you're not producing as much growth as you can if you don't have open doors, because the whole model is premised that you've got some kind of free flow. And so I think that's another kind of way of countering this at least in market-based economies, countering that argument.
Yes. Okay, I think we had a question in the back.
Good morning. So I think the discussion has been really good. So I have maybe an observation, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. So in 2020, when my name is Natalie, and I'm the CEO of Kepler. We are an education nonprofit, and we started a university and work in refugee work. And in 2020, we were a smaller organization, and then of course, everything was disrupted in the world. And in one way, it was quite useful for us because we decided that we pivoted immediately towards long-term sustainability because we realized that we were basically at the whims of whoever was funding us. But then we received an huge unrestricted grant that allowed us to do what was core to sustainability, which was infrastructure. And so you can't do anything if you don't control your infrastructure. And so it really opened my mind to, hey, we need to, this has been so powerful for us because if you look at us now versus 6 years ago, it's night and day. And in fact, I would argue that now we don't look sexy enough for most philanthropists. We're not poor enough anymore for most philanthropists. And I say that not jokingly. But the work you're talking about around deep inner work. So I have spent 5 years going to twice a year with some of our funders, who, by the way, are incredible. And the questions they'll ask us, what should we be doing? What should we be anticipating? And we spend a week away. I spend a week away from my actual job talking about what we should be doing overall, which is great. What should we be doing in the sector? And then when the report comes out, you almost feel like you didn't attend the same meeting. And this repeats itself 2-3 times a year or once a year. And the question is, how do we create more of an, I would say, honest? Because if we spend so much time together as colleagues and we come up with something that we think is really urgent, because we look in the work we do and we say, hey, this is what we think is great. And when it comes out, some of the shifts that are happening, you feel like you didn't attend the same meeting. And so I spend a lot of time actually in my current job. She's on my board. I spend a lot of time telling the board that I spend a lot of time working on not becoming angry. And I don't mean this in a soft way. I think I spend a lot of time saying, these are our partners. We're building something together. And yet I often feel misunderstood because you're doing all the right things, but it doesn't look sexy enough anymore. And yet, you need to push in the same direction for a very long time before you see the kind of change our partners are looking for. So what is the right answer to that, Cecilia? Most importantly, I'm interested because you've been doing this a long time. And truly, it is a partnership, right? We're doing something together. But how do we do it in a way where I don't feel like we're going to another retreat? You know, and I don't want to go for wellness. I really want to go to do something for the you know, yeah.
Yeah, this isn't a wellness retreat for you. Here I'm going to draw mainly from personal experience. You know, you can tell I have white hair. I went to my first kind of, we're going to do racial healing workshop when I was 11 years old. And I can, you know, I've counted lots of them. So I'm picking on this particular topic because I think it's an example of the fact that people who are the donors, as you mentioned, the people who do have some power embedded in the fact that they have resources, have to understand how not to be extractive. So I would argue if you walk away and you feel like you were at a different meeting, then it was not so much a partnership as an extraction. If you come away and you're exhausted by the experience and everybody else is walking away feeling like they're pretty energized and happy, then that was an extractive relationship. And kind of figuring out how to communicate that, which is sometimes, I know, a choice we all have to make as to whether we're going to stay silent or get loud. I think more and more we have to say that out loud. Like I looked at what came out of this, and unless I get to have some say over what that product is and what that report is, then maybe I'm not going to participate anymore. Maybe I'm not going to be part of this. It's hard, and it can't always be done because sometimes you do really need that relationship, but it's also sometimes an opportunity to bring in people like me with white hair who don't have to have that relationship to say it. So that is something that for the funders in the room to really be conscious of not only the time extraction, but also the emotional energy and investment that you're extracting, because it does leave you angry.
I agreed, and I thank you for raising this point. It's so much of when you walk away from that room, even I think when in those conversations between donors and recipient of funds, a lot of the time, even before you walk into the room, maybe it was already decided how people would feel. I mean, speaking from personal experience, okay, these funders are going to listen, or maybe this, recipient of funds are not going to listen. There are meetings like that, but you still need to do that meeting. Okay, so it's like that, right?
Yes.
So for me, I just want, we can speak from a point of deficit. We can speak from a point of like what have been done, and then we build upon that. We would try to, I would try to find funders who share similar values, and then who are you working with, and just kind of, go into that directions. I think for me, because the first question you asked is like, how can philanthropy help us to reach a better world? I do genuinely feel that a lot of work is inner work, and how philanthropy does that in their practice, but even over time extend that to how that is done, so that at the end of the day, I feel like everyone should be doing philanthropy on a daily basis, because it's a reciprocal. It's a reciprocal relationships. And if we can go, philanthropy means the love of humanity. And if we are all doing that on a daily basis, that is not just about model and framework, but married with that inner work. I think that we have a great chance. We have, that's what I'm excited about to do.
And I started saying that I don't have all the answers, so of course I don't have the answer for this very tough and important question that you're asking. But what I can offer from my experience, I think, goes back to one of the questions Jimpo has asked us, that is all about relationships. And relationships take time to build. So we're also learning as we're going. We're learning from what's happening, and we're iterating. So it's not also that we have done all this inner work, so we know what we want. Everything is happening a bit at the same time, but I do hope we can create relationships to people to have the space to speak up and to share these things and these frustrations. And I have had many difficult conversations with the entrepreneurs we support, and sometimes it's really tough, and it's really tough for them and for us. But we're in this together, and I hope we can create spaces that this angriness can come out, of course, in the best way we can to be productive. And going back to what I said before, I think it helps to be grounded on what it is that we want to achieve together, and that's long term. And that, we're not just bound by the outputs, but really to get to that thing, I thought it was this way, but now has to be this way, and I don't understand why you have put this here. So I do hope we on the other side can do our best to be fully present in these conversations and building these relationships and taking our share of the responsibility too.
Yeah. Before we go to the next question, I just want to thank you for raising that and just affirm that you're not the only person who feels that way. And so I would say, what I'm taking away from this dialogue is funders, we have to not be extractive. We have to do better. And when we say this is a partnership and a relationship, there's a huge amount of that work is really about work that funders need to do. Thank you. Oh my gosh, a lot of questions. I'm going to follow the person with the mic.
Hi, good morning. My name is Swithin Munyantwali. I'm with the ILI South African Center for Excellence, and for close to 3 decades I've been involved in building legal institutions across the continent. It's a privilege to be here. Cecilia, you mentioned that law is a bulwark, and that obviously resonates with me and obviously a lot of people in this room. And I'm wondering why, in your opinion and others on this panel, legal infrastructure lags behind in prominence during the development conversation. In my experience, and I've been in a number of different conversations over the years, there tends to be more value placed on seen development, roads, healthcare institutions, things you can see, but very little emphasis placed on what you can't see, but what is really essential to why we are all here today, and why, you can take for granted crossing the street in Oxford or in Washington, and not take the same thing for granted in another part of the world. So why is that? That what is so crucial is seen in less important terms. And we see the impact of this weak bulwark in the most unlikely places today. So I just would like to get your view, because I find that some of us in this work are sort of fighting a lonely battle, even though we are making progress over time. Thank you.
I think it's free.
You said Cecilia. I'm going to preface this by, in an earlier life, I wanted to be a development economist, but I did not become one. But one of the things that I think I've seen start to emerge as a topic in this area is the importance of institutions in how, not only how economies develop, but how societies develop. I think you have made a really critical point, an important point, and it's an interesting, I don't know why it is that the systems of assistance haven't taken that up, like haven't really addressed that. But then the question is, in what ways can philanthropy address it? And I know the MacArthur Foundation at various points has done work on transitional justice, has tried to do work in those areas. But it is an area that's underfunded, I believe. That's my impression.
We don't work directly on legal terms, but we do work on rule of law, because we do a lot of work in democracy, which I think is the basis for everything that we do, but can also feel invisible sometimes. And I get the struggle. We have it too. So I think our tactic, in a way, has been to combine what is the long-term vision. We believe stronger democracies will create the conditions for better access to opportunities. How we combine this bold long-term vision with quick wins that people can see. So we feel that if we can demonstrate that we're inspiring and attracting more diverse people to want to go into office, and we see these emerging people, emerging leaders that inspires hope, that fuels the long-term vision. So I shared the struggle on things that are super important but invisible, and what we have been trying to find is, okay, how we combine something we can see, that is a sign that we're going towards that direction, not losing sight that what really motivates us is that invisible thing that is hard to measure, but when we do have a better functioning of government and political culture, we'll all feel it. So we work towards that and combine with shorter terms that can mobilize people towards that. And then we advance. As Trevor Noah said yesterday, I think it's a little bit of that, how you find things that, we can work together towards that, and then we push a little bit further. So trying to find those combinations.
I think we have time for 2 more questions. So let's do one here and one here.
Thank you. Hi, I'm not going to stand up since I'm in the front, but hello, everybody. My name's Chanel Elaine. I'm with Kashif Incubator. And I just want to first thank you all for the knowledge and guidance that you're bringing into the room and imparting. A couple of things come up for me. When I see philanthropy in a time of disruption, walking into the room, I wasn't quite sure what disruption were we talking about. In the states where I'm at right now, it can be thought of what's happening with the current regime, that's the disruption. But for me, that is kind of the overt way in which what's been existing in the country for 250 years is now showing itself in the ways that it really wanted to all of its time. And so, I feel like I'm the disruption because I've been trying to do what I can as an activist to usurp the kind of corporate capitalist ways in which culture exists, right? And how that exists in all of us consciously and unconsciously, right? Like we talk a lot about unconscious racial bias, but there's a lot of unconscious corporate capitalist bias that exists in us that like we can only start to like engage with when we're curious about the impact of all of the visuals that we see every day. And so my question around failure and being risk averse and engaging in investing in possibility as opposed to polish, right? Like I feel like there's a way that when applications or relationships are built, that risk aversion that is about, we can't quite step to you because you haven't been around long enough, you haven't proven yourself enough, and there's a loss of being able to see the possibility in what's being extolled as opposed to this is a very polished, cute, shiny toy that we can invest in. So I'm just curious as to like your experiences around that.
Thank you. Because we're running short on time, I'm actually going to take this last question and invite you all to respond to both. But thank you for that.
Thank you. I'm Erin Gallegos, and I'm with an organization called Moonshot Platform. And a lot of what we're doing is actually just trying to bring more young people into spaces like this. And I don't think any of the moonshotters are here in this room. But if you see some young people around there, just say hi to them. Please include them in this because we really want to bring their voices into this conversation as well. My question is really around something that I'm starting to think about maybe as circularity in philanthropy, because although I do think that I'm starting to see, even in the short time that I've been in this sector, much more discussion of trust-based philanthropy, investment in infrastructure, unrestricted funding becoming more available and becoming a topic of discussion, it still feels like there is a money rolls downhill and becomes impact conversation. And so my question about circularity is then, where is the change and how do we work to change the narrative about this being the impetus and the mover and this being the impact, and bringing actually the people who we consider the beneficiaries of philanthropy into the decision-making around what the problems are, where the funding goes in the first place. Because I think as much as trust-based philanthropy is sort of between the donor, the funder, and then the implementer, there's this piece of the community and the society which then still remains out of that conversation. So I'd just like to hear your thoughts.
Great. Thank you for both of those questions. So I'm going to invite us to do quick responses to how do we invest in possibility versus polish, and how do we change who's in the decision making, and then let's try to keep a couple minutes for final responses.
When we first started Lever for Change, which really grew out of an initiative at MacArthur called 100 and Change, one of the principles that we were trying to design for was to shift who got to decide where we invested a lot of resources from the foundation and its board and its staff to a broader kind of community. And that, I think, is embedded in the concept of the open call and in the ways in which we have evaluated things. A step that I have not successfully convinced others to do is to actually, when I've worked with donors, is to actually convene some kind of community, a citizens assembly or so on, to actually design what that open call would look like and to really control the whole process. But I'm getting close. I'm getting close. It's like patience, as you said. And on the issue of the possibility and polish, one of the areas where we have tried to nudge our donors to educate them a bit more is that I found that they historically over-index on things that they think, if this goes wrong, I'm going to be laughed at. And that means they over-index on financial risk, on management risk, on all kinds of risk other than the risk that you're investing in something that actually will not have an impact on the community that you want it to have because you haven't engaged that expertise. And that is also a work in progress, but it is part of, I think, framing this as there is a risk when you invest in something that's so much polish that it's just that and nothing more. So I think getting that education done.
I'll try to reply them together. Unfortunately, there are so many problems in the world. So I think it all starts with focus. We cannot solve all the problems, so we need to know what are the problems that we want to solve and be experts on them. For those problems, we need to talk with all the stakeholders. We need to know everything about it, but then cannot be all the problems. And then on that problem that we have chosen, then we can have a lot of depth. And what we invest at the end of the day is in the possibilities to create solutions. In our network, we have amazing entrepreneurs, amazing organizations that are doing incredible work, but as we have been saying, none of them have figured out completely how to solve things. So I feel every time we're investing, even though they might have a track record, we're investing in the possibility of what we can create together. We do a lot of incubation and venture building, so there's literally no track record, right? It's trusting those entrepreneurs and giving them the seed money and the conditions to build it. So I think we need to take that risk, but to take that risk, we need focus, and we need to know what is the problem that we need to choose, and then hear everyone for that problem.
Thank you. I'll be quick as well. There's another Yidan Prize laureate who is speaking later today, Angie Marimura from CanFed. She was the first cohort of the program that she received. Now she runs the organizations, times 100 most influential. She's one of our laureates. All of our education development laureates come from the community. And it goes back to making them feeling they are part of the foundation. So they would be helping to figure out the direction of the prize, influence what's important in education. So the practice really is, again, we don't have laureates. They're Annette, they're like Linda, they're people. And they are part of the foundation now forever. So for us, it's really try to not to use that framework that is more maybe capitalistic, as you will, like investor and then investees. So change that language, have a different, have a community, we are whole, we're inseparable. I think that is something. We cannot speak for everyone, but again, the world has so many issues. I think we work on the part that we can, and then really build it from there.
So on this panel, I've heard each of you say that you don't have all the answers, but I'm sitting here with gratitude for how many lessons you've shared with all of us. And in the remaining 2 minutes we have left, I wonder if you could each share your answer to that prompt in the beginning, right? So philanthropy helps us get to that more equitable, peaceful, and just future by.
By helping to correct for and mitigate the tendency for wealth to concentrate by multiple means of disrupting that.
I'll build on something that was said in the beginning by helping us figure out what is our shared vision of future, what it is that we want to achieve, and being this oil in a way that works with governments and markets to make them work better so that we get to this shared vision.
By practicing philanthropy in a reciprocal way, and through that, extend it to a broader practice that is not always in oppositions. We are all in it together. We all have constraints. Let's do that with that relationship, human connections, as the fundamental basis. Really advocate for that. That would be my answer.
Fantastic. Will you all join me in thanking our amazing panelists?